Welcome to the Grid Podcast episode number 2. Our goal is to educate and to bring hard-hitting truths about America's critical infrastructure. These podcasts are supported by the Foundation for Infrastructure Resilience, a nonprofit 501c3. Political opinions expressed in the podcast by participants are their own opinion and not necessarily that of FIR. Additionally, FIR does not endorse or assure accuracy of information presented. We invite you to please do your own research into these topics. With that said, today's topic is resiliency, the ability to withstand, adapt, recover quickly from difficulties. We have a phenomenal guest joining us today, Brigadier General Kenneth Chrosniak. General Khrosniak enlisted in the Army in 1965, was commissioned through Officer Candidate School, and went on to serve 37 years of combined duty in the regular Army, Army Reserve, and National Guard. Ken was promoted by New York Governor George Pataki to Brigadier General in 2005. He has served in various command and staff assignments in the U.S. and overseas, including Vietnam, Bosnia, Kuwait, Egypt, and Iraq. After 9/11, he was recalled to active duty service and served 2 years on the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the Pentagon, where he helped write the National Military Strategic Plan for the War on Terror. With follow-on service in Iraq for several months at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, Iraq, and later as commander of the Ghirab Forward Operating Base and Detention Facility. He returned home for 1 year when he was again recalled to active duty for an additional 2 years as the Chief of Staff of the Army Asymmetric Warfare Office located in the Pentagon. General Khrosniak is currently the Vice President of Cumberland Goodwill Ambulance Company, active firefighter with Carlisle Fire and Rescue Company, and President of Impact America, and the Congressional Homeland Defense Task Force board member. So let us dive right in. General Khrosniak has put together this brilliant presentation for us today. After the presentation, the general will have a Q&A. So please place your questions in the chat and place a question mark after your comment, so we can differentiate between your comments and the actual question. So without further ado, General, take it away.
Thank you so much, Maria, for doing this. Put on slide 1, please.
Hang on.
To everybody, this is going to be the proverbial death by PowerPoint. I have a few slides here, but I'm definitely going to leave at least 10, 15 minutes with Maria's advice at the end to ask any question to answer any questions you might have. But basically, some of them are going to be transitory, and to use an old Army War College faculty statement that I made up, that the War College is adamantly opposed to plagiarism, but not to lifting good ideas from a lot of smart people. The word lifting is not a legalistic term, of course. No, so if you see some of the slides that look real familiar to you, thank you very much for your inspiration on this. Is the first slide up?
Yes, sir.
Okay. As you can see in the bottom line up front, which is my favorite term, it's a clear and present danger right out of Tom Clancy. We're not prepared to survive. And I do not like to read the verbiage on the slide. I've never been that way, and I've instructed everybody giving me a slide not to do that either, because I can read. But basically, the most important thing is that it is no longer air, water, and food. Air for 3 minutes, water for 3 days, and food for supposedly 3 weeks. Is now air and electricity. Everything is supported by that. Slide 2, please, Marie. Here's a good example of a failure to imagine. I know a lot of people share that statement, but I believe it was Dr. Peter Vincent Pry, my fantastic mentor that I learned an awful lot from. But he liked that one, failure to imagine. Were they warned, like in the Aniyoshi in the prefecture, with the Fukushima disaster that took place? Yes, they were warned. On the western portion of the island, it's a classic failure to imagine, which our homeland is suffering from right now. There's stone tablets 4 foot to 10 foot high, about 300 of them, more than 600 years old. They're found all along the Japanese coast, warning of tsunamis in towns like Aniyoshi. After the tidal wave flooded over 500 square kilometers of Japanese coast, they learned that sighting the reactor in Fukushima ignored those stone markers. So 19,000 lives, meagerly speaking, and in incalculable sums, where seawater is sure again to flood that same area, not when, but, not if, but when, future earthquakes. Another example of failure to imagine is right here in Hawaii. Nobody knew what to do when they got this message from that incoming ballistic missiles were on their way, at that time presumably from North Korea back in 2018. So there was an ecstasy of fumbling, people trying to protect their children, putting them down in underground systems as best they could. So another failure to imagine. The other one that I was closely investigated when I was at the War College was this August in 2003. The blackout was power companies trying to save a buck disregarded the tree management and so on, and they touched a high tension line in Dayton, Ohio, and it was an ecstasy of fumbling after that. Software bugs, a race condition, messing up the energy management system. It should be noted, if you're looking at that, and there are about 256 power plants down, 22 nuclear reactors. There was one power plant that stayed active. It was the Niagara Falls Lewiston hydroelectric plant. And you can't shut down a hydroelectric plant. Plus, this hydroelectric plant does, I believe, still has an analog system too, which most power systems were foolish to get rid of and go over to non-analog. Basically, many of you on this call probably know this quite well. There's three elements of the grid. There's a bulk electric system with the generation, transmission, and distribution. It stops at that dotted line over to distribution. Also very important to this is actually, I consider 4 parts. There's a SCADA system, supervisory controlled data acquisition systems that control all of that. Basically keeping the load. You need a load. The load over there is you, the consumer, and the business person. Has to be equally managed with the generation. And they're regulated differently too. At the federal level, you have the Federal Electric Reliability Corporation or Commission and the North American Reliability Corporation, which is kind of dynamic because it's funny when I go back to if I went back to that slide, but you don't have to, Maria. Don't go back to it. Talking about with all those millions of people without power in New York and Quebec and so on. It took 10 years, 10 whole years, for the NERC to come up with a SIP to correct that. That's unbelievable.
So which slide? Because you haven't said
excuse me,
next slide.
number 7, please. I'm so sorry. It's my head's recent timing on that.
That's okay.
Right now, the
Okay.
backbone of the grid are the computers. Now, I believe close to about 3,000 of them, mostly heavy transformers that do the step up and step down. They step up the power leaving the generation plant and step it down going to your homes and so on to your 120 and 140 volt. But unfortunately, about 600 of them so far are produced in communist China. Next slide, please.
Okay, so I just asking a quick question. This slide, which has the grid, how electricity is distributed and regulated, this is basically a general overall simplified architecture of the grid. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that for you.
Thank you for that better elucidation.
Okay,
they're critical. Now, the electric industry has in whole. There's quite a few thousand power generation units out there, entities out there. There's a transformer spares program, which is about 5% replacement availability. But most of those are probably 40 plus years old. And but each transformer has to be specifically manufactured for the customer specifications and exact placement within a grid. There's no one size fits all. Next slide, please. Here's the critical infrastructures out there. 16 of them. There were 18. It was pared down to 16, I believe, by President Obama. And they all have to work. I put little smiley faces in there. Which ones are more important? To me, energy. Energy is the premier with the associated electricity it produces, because everything is run by electricity. All of those other 15 are intertwined with structures. Next slide, please.
Oh, can I ask a
And here,
question? Can I ask a question regarding this slide before we move on
please.
real quick? In the smiley face, you got the really big one, which is information technology. Would that include the data centers that are being built across the country?
Those are more over in the IT.
Oh, okay.
You'll see them.
Yeah.
I'm looking for
Okay.
it right now.
Okay.
Information technology is a little bit, well, now with the push for AI and trying to keep ahead of enemy or hostile nations such as China and so on. The push for data centers is even more. Data centers are consuming. I have one about 4 miles from my house that's being built, unfortunately for us, but
Mhm.
good for the nation, I guess. But it consumes 1 million gallons of water a day just to keep
Wow.
cooling. It produces megawatts, 100 and some megawatts a day. It's unbelievable. All 700 acres of good farmland is now going to be a data center, and I can see the need for it, but yet it's just going to be very, very difficult. And people in Virginia, the ratepayers, which are you, the consumers, are paying for this now, and we in Pennsylvania will be paying for it also unless they develop their own power source. Um, can you
So,
go to?
so
Oh,
you
go
can
ahead.
one really so you can safely say that the piece of the pie for the information technology will probably go up from 14% to maybe what, uh, maybe a quarter or more
Oh,
of the pie.
probably more than that. In just about the 2 or 3 more years. They're being built, quite quickly right now. Uh, uh, the people really have no say in it. We had a
Right.
couple town hall meetings, and I didn't go to them because I knew we have no say in it. It's already been described, and money's already exchanged hands.
Right.
Um, can
Okay.
you Did you
Next
go to
slide.
that vulnerability of U.S. military and civilian systems?
Yep, I'm on that slide, sir.
Slide number 10. And again, appreciate from my headspace and timing on this. The This is important because this is right from the EMP Commission in 2008, 8-year study. It was commissioned at the same time as the planes were landing in the same year as the planes were attacking us in New York City. They looked at the nuclear threat. That was their only mission, to look at the nuclear threat. But anything else, cyber, IEMI, we'll go over RF, new Madrid, faulty earthquake, anything else can take down the grid. But you can see uh, both civilian and military capabilities depend on these infrastructures, which we know already. The viewers on this know. The next slide, please.
Okay.
This is a homemade slide I made up a long time ago. I just had to show it because I wasn't very busy at the work I was teaching at that time. So I made up the slide. Basically, everything in this nexus, everything it depends on electricity. And the next slide, please. What I aim for, I always plan for the worst case situation, and the people I deal with do the same thing. If you plan for the worst case situation, 2 weeks without power up in Buffalo, New York, which happened last year with 56 people dead. You can plan for that. Everything else is somewhat easier to mitigate, easier to prepare for, I should say. But this catastrophic power outages is what the people in America have a failure to imagine. And you can read those. But basically, in military terms, any recovery operations will be out in what we call a VUCA environment: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous in the extreme. And that's what next slide, please.
Okay.
Now I'm going to go over the threats, which many of you know already, but I'll just go over them very, very lightly because there's a few more slides to go. And there's the list of all of the adversaries and all of the threats that will maybe not eat on for a while now, but it's just a matter of time until they will be again. But these are what I think the threat vectors are, including Pakistan. Solar, inevitable event. NASA NOAA said they're predicting a 12% probability of a major solar geomagnetic disturbance per decade, or it could be tomorrow or right now. Like Bill Fortune said, it could happen in a second. And we missed it. I believe it was in 2012. We missed a massive Carrington event type event by 2 weeks, or we probably wouldn't be talking on this medium right now, because it would have been global, and it would have been you would have been able to produce all of the thousands of extra high voltage transformers as we do now. Next slide, please. Here's a solar coronal mass ejection, a huge plasmatic event.
Can I ask a quick question regarding CMEs? Has the grid been hardened in this area at all, or is it completely vulnerable?
It's completely vulnerable. There are some wonderful power companies that are doing the best, and I think I can. They've done some studies. Joint Base San Antonio was a fantastic event, and so on. They've been planning this for actually years. But to answer the question, as far as I know, and there's people on this, hopefully they'll be able to answer some of these questions too. When you get people like Tommy Waller and Doug Ellsworth, people working within the Secure the Grid Coalition, it still doesn't answer the mail, because you can protect the transformers. They're not that expensive. We have the technology right now to do it. Probably with companies like Imprimus and other companies that have these that take, okay, let's just say 50,000 volts per meter comes in, or 100,000 from a nuclear, or maybe 200,000 volts per meter, which the North Koreans and Russians have massive capability of a nuclear, high altitude nuclear burst. That's direct current going into an AC transformer. They have systems that'll bring it to ground numerous times, because there won't be one strike. There's not going to just be what we saw, balloons coming across our nation, already from communist China. We didn't shoot them down, but you're not going to have one nuclear burst coming. You're going to probably have 100 or more at different parts of the nation, because it's in there. It's in even those 2 billion colonels that wrote Unrestricted Warfare, which reading it makes your eyeballs roll on the back of their head, because it's. But by that way, there was a book. I'm not making any money off this. Written by Brigadier General Bob Spaulding, War Without Rules. He speaks Mandarin. He wrote this book. He read Unrestricted Warfare from these 2 brilliant Chinese communist colonels, and even somebody. I understand this, but every war college, everybody should be reading this book, because this is the enemy we're going to be fighting, and I'll go through a couple slides and talk about it more. But this is the way to take down the electric grid. Next slide, please. Any formidable, is that the nuclear hemp? Slide 16. Sorry to put that. Is that good? Oh, I lost your audio. Anyway, any formidable enemy will not use one attack vector, because they're going to be using multiple attack vectors, including that lofting a high altitude nuclear burst, cyber, and physical attacks, and oftentimes one after the other. Next slide.
Okay, before we move from the high EMP slide, can you explain what happened over Hawaii many years ago, when I don't know which branch of the military, but they did actually detonate something at a very high altitude, and it did affect Hawaii,
Yeah.
many miles away.
That was Starfish Prime. I forgot the year. I know it quite well, but I think it was 800, 900 miles away was Honolulu. It was, I believe, 1 megaton surface burst, and the street lights flooded. There were no, other than transistor radios and so on. You don't have the capable computers like we have now. This was quite a few years ago, a few decades ago, and but they were still telling destruction. The street lights went out, were flittering. There were problems, and of course I didn't keep this one slide in, because a nuclear burst was detonated by the Russians over, I think it was Kyrgyzstan, and their own people, or a neighboring area in the Soviet Union, as a test. We can't do that in our country. But the Soviets did it, and there was considerable damage. I don't know if there was any loss of lives that wasn't mentioned. So, but they lost the power plant, fires. It was quite devastating. And I'll mention that in another slide. 17, is that the North America?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And it's by line of sight too. And again, like Dr. Peter Vincent Bryce stated, quote, EMP is a high-tech means of killing millions of people the old-fashioned way, through starvation, disease, and societal collapse, end quote. Basically, he was saying, is it a weapon of mass destruction or a weapon of mass effects? Weapon of mass destruction, we know, is nuclear and so on, tactical nuclear, like 8-inch nuclear rounds we used to have in my artillery unit I was in. That's a mass destruction, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. But mass effects, not killing anybody right away, up and up to 400 kilometers above the Earth. You hit a nuclear burst, not even in the megatonnage, and sit back and wait for it to affect all 16 critical infrastructures. It won't take long, and that's what we're going to be getting into. It's through, like John Hollerman states very eloquently, through starvation, disease, and no rule of law for months or years. And we've all seen our society is just enhanced by the internet. I mentioned this enough. I've got to get into some other slides. We'll just skip over to 22.
Okay.
A physical attack.
22, physical attack. Yes.
Yeah. And I remember I was in San Francisco not long after that at a conference on the grid, and even the senior agent in charge. I remember him because he and I were talking. And he gave a presentation, and he said they were considering workplace violence, and everybody laughed. This was a well-coordinated and accurate SEAL level expertise, small arms fire attacking at PG&E's 500 kV substation in Metcalf, California, by multiple individuals. They cut wires, they cut the cables at the wall. They knew what they were doing. They reconned it well, and it took the police arrived there, I think, 15 minutes later. They shot up the transformer cooling tanks, and it didn't affect Silicon Valley, but a lot of the transformers were overheated and were destroyed. And PG&E sunk $1 million in, and of course, whoever it was went back a year after that, after they put all that money into it, and went in and damaged the control systems and so on in the control center. So,
yeah.
But presently, there's no substantive defense posture exists for these vulnerable substations. The only protection I've seen are just a chain link fence, which a Boy Scout troop could climb over. Next slide, please. This is one from Dr. George Baker, another one of my idols, past director of the Defense Threat Reduction Agencies. He pretty well did this. I probably could have gotten rid of about 6-7 slides just on this one. And did you mention, Maria, I wanted to mention everybody right now, I'd like to make available, and Maria, we're going to be doing it, to make these slides available to you with I call it the talking dog portion. That's what I always told my staff, with the notes section.
Yes.
And you can see some of the notes I'm reading now. I would like you to be able to see this and give it off to other people. You'll have a PDF version, I believe you're making, right?
Yes.
But even the yellow segments are tenuous at best, because you have to think the worst case situation, because these are going to be turning red somewhere along the line. Maybe if Dr. Dig, there's not a timeline on this, but some of these are going to be, the reds are going to be immediate. Next slide. And we talked about data centers. Slide number 14.
I'm on slide 24. Yes, we talked about data centers.
24, yes. Excuse me. In the event of an EMP, that's the new communication system, was a bullhorn, and be able to talk to your fellow data centers with a real powerful bullhorn, powered by I don't know what. Next slide, please. But here it is. I'm getting into the resiliency because I know time is passing. Everything has a center of gravity. In Germany, the center of gravity was fuel, ball bearings. That's why my father was on the first Ploesti raid, as a B-24 pilot Liberator, and the two subsequent ones also he lived through. But it was hitting the center of gravity that'll destroy a nation. Ours is energy. Ours is electricity. But there's supporting points of failure, single points of failure that support that center of gravity destruction. Personnel, comms, fuel, and time, which basically the world is now on fire with multitude threat vectors, and we're going to go over that very quick. Next slide, please. This one is actually designed. This came from Craig Fugate himself, the former director of FEMA. I believe the slides were we at the work. Well, I won't say who gave them. They were told not to show them anymore, but I show them to everybody. There were several slides showing a progression, but this is a coronal mass ejection, and after 8 hours, he was estimating the POTS is a plain old telephone system. Systems started to show either total or partial damage. But as you know, comms is critically important, especially ComSat, communication satellite communication, and MilSatcom, military satellite communication, because the military doesn't have, they have a considerable amount of satellites out there, but they have to use commercial satellites also, especially for more increased bandwidth. And again, the POTS is a plain old telephone system. But the next slide, please, shows it after 30 days, where everything is down, including the satellites. Not all of them, but scintillation over time. And there's the 911 centers are in here, and the fire companies and the police stations, and it shows satellites within the low Earth orbit, medium Earth orbit, MEO and geosynchronous orbits. They'll all be affected to some degree, as you can see there, a little bit of yellow and some red. Some might still be operating, but the antennas that receive that information will not fare well either. And that degraded, denied, destroyed communications severely affects any kind of initial recovery and reconstitution efforts. Next slide, please. Fuel, that's mind-numbingly complex. Diesel fuel is the most important. Diesel fuel is extremely important. I remember talking with some experts about the refinery production. When the power plant, when the strike does take place, they won't lose power right away because they have emergency diesel generators. The same with the nuclear power plants; they have EDGs. But like those nuclear power plants have 7 days of supply on hand.
Right.
And when asked, I was at one conference, a tabletop exercise at National Defense University, and there was a representative there from the National Nuclear Regulatory Commission, because Dr. George Baker, I believe, asked the question, how are we going to be resupplied for fuel? And he said, the Army's been tasked to do that. Well, we'll go over some slides right now, because not only will the refineries stop after several days if they can't receive fuel or use their own fuel, the product inside the pipes is impacted. They have to be flushed out. So it's very, very intricate.
Right.
Probably shouldn't even get into it right now because it's a very prolonged event. Next slide, please.
Can I ask a question before we move to the next slide on this?
Yes.
You spoke about EDGs, and those are, like you said, emergency diesel generators. And I just wanted to put in perspective that these are not the little generators you buy at Home Depot. These are generators that are as large as a 2,200 square foot house. They're huge.
400 ton.
Yeah, they're huge. And I had a conversation with the great Dr. Eugene Lim. He's actually a nuclear physicist and has designed many facilities around the world. And his concern was that these EDGs, and probably so at these fuel plants, are not completely tested to full capacity. In other
Mhm.
words, it's like having your car in the garage and you going in and just turning it on and saying it works, uh, but never fully putting it in reverse, driving out of your driveway and driving around.
Right,
How do you know it's going to drive? So many of these EDGs in these facilities have not are not fully tested. So many have the probability of failing. So I just wanted to mention that too. I'll go to the
right.
next slide. Yep.
And also, like Joe Weiss has said many times with the Aurora effect, where
Hmm.
32 lines of code blew up a very extremely large generator with 32 lines of code with a cyber attack in Idaho National Labs just a few years ago. In fact, we'll be getting into cyber shortly. I took this slide is actually Tommy Waller's slide, and I know it's not that clear, but hopefully it's clear enough. If not, when you have the PDF version in front of you, wherever you are after this, you'll see that this is just transportation alone. Uh, it, Garbage, ATMs, food production, just-in-time logistics. Walmart, you order a book online and it's there within a day or two. Those days are going to stop, especially for food. Next line, please.
Okay.
Slide 31. No,
Sorry.
30
Yeah.
people.
30.
People I consider the 17th critical infrastructure. People in the military are weapon systems. Somewhere between class 1 and class 10. They're a weapon system because you can fight with your hands, whatever. We don't even need any other platform. But people are needed. And I've been to so many tabletop exercises, even at the War College, where you have high-ranking people at NCOs, even Northcom. We had a meeting with them. They wrongly assume that people are going to be present for the long haul, and they're wrong. The same goes for the Defense Industrial Base. We have depots around here, New Colin Army Depot and the Navy Supply Depot that runs both fleets, and they'll be home with their families where they belong.
Hmm.
It's just one of those. And here is one that it pretty well says it all, and you can read through these.
So
And these have been
basically,
looked over
you're,
by many experts and say, yeah, that's thinking worst case situation. Uh, I've given this brief, this slide to Governor Brewer and her staff. I gave it to 2,200 Mormons out in Delta, Utah in the Big Palladium. I gave it to then candidate Trump back in March of 2016 and Texas Senate. They read that and nothing substantive has been done. Texas is coming a long way too, but that's for another discussion. But here, this comes right out of John Hollerman.
how
Human
long
desperation.
would you say it takes to get to a point where everyone is on their own in the
Well,
case of a nationwide outage?
Well, two things. Number one, like even Puerto Rico, the Katrina and so on, we had the liberty. There's 10 FEMA regions. They're all become. We have the Cajun Navy. We have all kinds of assistance coming to those
Mhm.
disaster areas for hopefully reconstitution. At least trying to control the bleeding. You won't have that because there'll be simultaneously maybe 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 FEMA regions all involved at the same time. Number two, do you live in Manhattan? Do you live in Stump Jump County someplace? Do you live in the suburbia? It'll happen fast in the cities. There'll be no worry there. It'll happen real fast. Probably just a couple days, and it'll be unbelievably bad. A week, you let your imagination run away with you from Fort
Mhm.
Apache, the Bronx movies, or whatever else you want to think of. Then there's the suburbia. uh, Food. You go to your local food store and you pull out a can of beans, and when you check that out, that tells the computer that go to they don't have 3 days of fuel. They don't have like the old stores uh, in the past. No, it goes back all the way to the distribution plant. Uh, back to the farmer itself. Okay, make another can of beans. Go whether it's in Mexico or in southern Arizona. You see where I'm coming from. And
Yeah.
then the rural areas, I've had people say, "Oh, that's no problem. We'll bug out instead of trying to bug in. We'll bug out and go to Rebecca Sunnybrook Farm where they have cattle and all that, and hopefully they'll take." No, no, it's not going to work in the extreme. It's right out of the movie The Postman with Kevin Costner. But it's not quite up to The Walking Dead. That fanatical. I think you know what I'm coming from. It's going to be very situational, and I'm going to go through this very quick. Next slide, 33.
30.
And in fact, I'm going to actually just put these in your mind, and you'll be able to read these on your own. And because there's a lot of verbiage in here. How long do you suppose the food in your pantry will last? Here, the next slide,
Question.
please. These are just questions to ask, and sort of an answer. There will be no emergency vehicles. There will be no cavalry coming over the hill. There will be no communication with those who live further away from you. If you rely on a city water supply and so on, and sewage, both will cease without fuel for the emergency diesel generators. Next slide, slide, please.
Mm-hmm.
Don't depend on your vehicle getting you out of Dodge, where you're going to go to anyway. You will not have lights once it turns dark outside. You have no money.
One thing I wanted you to cover, because I think it's
Yeah.
overlooked, is real quick, is the sewage part of this. Because at some point the sewage systems won't be functioning. Therefore, they're going to back up into people's houses, into buildings, can you
They
talk a
will.
little bit about that?
Actually, John Hollerman is definitely the functional expert on this, but using his words, yes, they will. It'll be uninhabitable.
Yep.
And unless you can go ahead and if you have any water, you can pour some cement down there and so on and keep it from happening. But it's going to happen somewhere,
Right.
and definitely will it because you have to have that kind of water. It's not just for wastewater, but it's also for potable drinking water.
Right.
Years ago, we had a horrible flood here, and the water system, the EDG, the one they had here in my town I'm living in, it was flooded. It was without power. Well, they had to bring another generator in there. So for a couple of days, there was some very little water pressure, but you were told to boil the water, and we did that for a few days. So we won't have that luxury because there are no backup EDGs. Now I think there's 2 backup EDGs here in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. The mayor is a fellow firefighter, so I'll just make him angry by mentioning his name. The next slide, please.
Okay.
Here's the end. I'm going to get in the meat of this, and I'm going to try to keep a few minutes because we're done at 1700, right?
Yeah, at 2:38. Yep.
2:30. FEMA and first responders and DOD are not prepared to conduct operations or assist. You can look at Texas, Florida, Puerto Rico, like I said before. So this is the way it'll go down. Any responders will, over probably a very short amount of time, run out of resources. The county emergency managers, they'll contact the state OEMs or Office of Emergency Management and say, we need help. And so on. The state AMs will call the governor's office and ask for more federal funds. The governor will then turn to the president and saying, we need assistance. And the POTUS will call the Secretary of War now and say, send me everything you've got. And the area of operation they'll be entering into will be unprecedented. Go to the next slide, please. Unprecedentably difficult. And that's what's so great about now is train as you fight. With conventional, I call them GPF forces, general purpose forces, like NORTHCOM has forces specifically set aside that each service, MARCENT, each service, more force, Air Forces, Army Forces, Navy Forces, Marine Forces, sent people into the NORTHCOM to go out and help U.S. citizens. That's part of the NORTHCOM's mission. I was there on the Joint Chiefs of Staff when NORTHCOM was formed. We took a couple months to do that, but they have zero plans or exercises. I know right at the War College we had a huge exercise back in 2009. And we had Northcom there with a lot of frustrating people because they wanted to do things and they couldn't do it. But here you can go down there. Troops are not trained to what to expect when they immerse in intense operations, including all compos. Neither is FEMA. There is involving numerous FEMA regions simultaneously over vast urban, suburban, rural areas simultaneously over multiple jurisdictions for prolonged periods of time. Next slide. While maneuvering within a humanitarian disaster environment with overwhelming mass care, shelter, graves registration, sanitation, lack of law enforcement, medical needs, under severe societal unrest, with armed gangs out there, a lot of military expertise out there that'll be trying to feed their families and their gangs, and they will do everything possible. It'll be severely degraded comms, degraded situational awareness, or GPS, for essential position, navigation, and timing, which is essential for both military and civilian. Loss of air traffic control, probably within, well, how much fuel do they have back in there in emergency diesel generators if they run?
Right.
Highways, roads congested. Here, you can read the no power generation. When I gave a talk at the out to 2,200 Mormons out in Delta, Utah, myself and Matt Stein, who wrote When Technology Fails, quite a survivalist. Anyway, inevitably, during my Q&A period, they said, "What kind of generator do you have?" And I said, "Well, I don't have one because you can't store MoGas, diesel, and propane. If you do get one, have a tri-fuel." I said, "No, yeah, just don't, prolong the agony." But anyway, it was. Next slide, please. But you can read this on your own. National Defense Act was authorized in 2020 and 2019 and 2020. But nothing substantive has been done. The American people have not been notified. And that's the reason, next slide, that's the reason that we have this podcast. As huge as it is, there's an awful lot of information to try to cram into 40 minutes and 45 minutes and all some Q&A. But it doesn't have to be this way. You have the power to change it. Yes. But first, you got to prepare you and your loved ones for some basic skills, the food. There's so many wonderful foods that you can order for a year or 2 years. Nothing's inexpensive, but this food that people have, it's going to last for decades and decades and decades, and it won't deteriorate. But the bottom line here is surely well known to many of you, I'm not trying to insult you, is that there remains too much resilience on federal and state governments to adequately protect you. All have failed to do so far, that because like anything else, all politics and all recovery will be local. But what can be done? The next slide, please. Slide 41. We're getting near the end.
Yes.
We have the technology to save lives right now. Will we save a significant amount? That'll take years. Can we aim for maybe 20 or 30%? When I briefed candidate Trump, his main question to me, he said, "Will we really lose 90% of the population the first year?" That came directly from him. And David Bellavia and I were giving him the brief. Medal of Honor recipient David Bellavia. And we said, "Yes, sir. But what happens if you only lose 1%? That's 3.2 million people. We're aiming for maybe 20% to try to save, and the others. But it is going to be expensive." He asked about how much would it cost to harden the entire grid. We said it's impossible to harden the entire grid. But he said, "Give me a ballpark figure to go for the 20-30%." And we said 50 billion, and he said that's doable. But that 50 billion compared to trillions of the other 15, all the 16 critical infrastructures got together with affecting our citizens. Some states are starting to recognize seriousness of the threats, which is good too. Texas, with their legislation right now protecting their grid, especially with 260 people dying there a couple of years ago during the winter storm. But basically, the cavalry is not coming, and you've got to start preparing. On next slide, please. There are some suggested readings. Again, I don't get any cutbacks from John Hallman for these books, uh, but these are Amazon bestsellers. If you really want to know, other than 1 Second After with Bill Forsham, which was fantastic, but it was just a prelude. These uh, they should be in a movie. All four of these books should be in a movie because it would be fantastic to really alert and incite the American people to do something.
Yep.
And that's really, I'm going to Q&A, and there's my email. If somebody wants to email me, please. I get a lot of spam calls, so don't try and call me. But I just kill them off. But there's my email. I will respond to you. I will send you all kinds of information. But please, I get excited when I talk about this because there are tabletop exercises. We're forming one right up in New York and Western New York for January or February, designed by Chuck Monto and David Hunt and General Luke Reiner. A dual TTX that will alert first responders. I'm going to have almost 200 first responders there in a big, huge fire company bingo hall, and show these slides. And we'll have Red Cross, churches, utilities, OEMs, elected officials. They're not leaders; they're elected officials. And the National Guard will have Northcom there. We'll have and talk about this. But what can you do? Storage bins for food and backup generators, whatever. But let them alert their people also, and you'll see some other further on slides within this briefing. But right now, I'm going to stop, and I stumbled my way through this because I get very excited about this because absolutely nothing substantive has been done. President Trump he signed another executive order. He signed Executive Order 13865 back in March of 2019, and it was ignored, except for the Joint Base San Antonio and a couple of other initiatives. But the bottom line is nothing's protected, especially nuclear power plants. I have one about 35 miles from the 3 Mile Island, which they're starting up again, hopefully for data centers instead of taking my power. But let's go to the questions. I'll start talking about other things that bother me, which I'm not going to take time.
The first one is by Joseph Robel, and he says, do you see any efforts on increasing manufacturing grid electrical components in the USA versus relying on the global supply chain?
That was the one that that was something that we brought up with the candidate Trump. He said, "Why aren't we building these in America?" We said, "Well, they're made by hand. There's glass, there's wood. They're made. A lot of it is made by hand with a heck of a lot of copper and other, I don't know, barium, beryllium. I don't know, rare earth materials that are from communist China. So it's a matter of also encompassing that in our plans, being able to manufacture our. Now we do make smaller. We do make some Mitsubishi. We do have some capability of making transformers, but not at this. So, and we've imported about 600, close to 600 Chinese transformers right now that supposedly have malware inside with that they can have the ability to shut down those transformers, and a huge amount of power going into Manhattan and also Las Vegas goes through communist Chinese transformers because they underbid Germany, I believe Korea, and Mexico. They underbid them by close to 40% from what I had heard. People can correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah. So we presently don't make them to as far as I know, the extremely high voltage transformers.
Yeah. How many of these Chinese transformers approximately are on the grid? Do you know?
I just know, according to like Secure the Grid Coalition, I believe Tommy and others, I believe 600.
Wow.
They're not in the standby. These are brand new. In fact, well, most of our transformers in America, I think the average age is about well excess of 40 years, so they're aging also. Uh, in fact, it's those uh, you have to have a lot more. It's nearly impossible to replace the transformers on an emergency basis. And when the SHTF or after when something catastrophic like this happens, this kind of VUCA environment, are the ports going to be open? Do we have cranes that can take off these 400 ton? Do we have railroad cars like the shovel cars? There's only 3 or 4 of them that are operating. Do we have bridges that can take that kind of weight? Do we have uh, tractor trailers or tractors that can haul that? We had one come through Carlisle here. People had to go out. You had to move telephone lines, and because they're mammoth, and you have to have special trained technicians too, which comes under the single point of failure with people. Where are those technicians going to be?
Right.
They're not going to be around because they'll be home with their families, where they belong.
Yeah, I think people fail to know as well that if I were to order, if I was a energy provider, if I were to order a transformer today, I might see it delivered maybe 2 to 3 years from now.
It's
So
two at best, 2 to 4 years.
2 to 4 years.
2 to 4
So
years. Yeah.
there's no resiliency, absolutely, in our grid in
No,
that from that.
there is, and even the nuclear power plants, they have. If the power goes down, they have the 2 flex systems. I forget what that emergency personnel with equipment and fuel that moves to those 2 areas. But there's something like 80 actual power generation nuclear power plants. There was about 90. Well, there's other power plants too, like some hospitals have nuclear reactors and nuclear for research and so on. But nuclear power plants probably around 80, I'm guessing. Um, and when they go down simultaneously, uh,
Right, right.
the
And like
these emergency backup systems will not be able to travel to
no,
all these areas because of the same points of failure: fuel, people, communications, food.
right,
I mean,
right.
that's what follow on briefing like this, especially with a great patriot like John Hollerman, to
Yes.
discuss food and so on. Food is a very technical area of expertise that John Holloman excels in, and it'd be great to have a
Yeah, we could do
Huntley,
that.
Huntley Brinkley with John.
Mhm. Well, and you mentioned 2 flex locations, and just so people know, I know for sure one is in Tennessee. So let's
It
say a
is.
nuclear power the power plant Calvert, which is just outside of the Beltway, the DC Beltway, if that goes out, the closest um, flex that can respond to anything that happens there is, let's see, from it's at, I know it's at the western or the eastern edge of Tennessee. It's still a 16-hour drive, assuming it can make
Yeah.
it there. So these things are not doable in that respect. But let's ask some of these questions. We got some really good questions here in the chat. So
Yeah.
Young Condos asks, are any special ops commanders invited to the tabletop exercises?
I I don't know, but I know one of the gentlemen that has helped me with it is a uh, Master Sergeant, E9 in the Air Force. He's a flight nurse. Flew a lot of our young men and women into Ramstein that were suffering from being attacked, and uh, he's a phenomenal. He may know some, but I understand because the special ops community, they always think the worst case situation,
Yeah.
and they're very proactive in their planning and so on. But I will make a note to contact. His name is Don. Contact him and see if he's be inviting them also, because he's a medevac pilot for like Lifeline, we call it here in Pennsylvania. So he has that service that he's a paramedic with a lot of time down range. Definitely combat oriented. But anyway, I hope I answered your question. That I will bring up have someone from the ops community.
And
Thank you.
we've got several more questions, so we'll try to get through
Please.
all of them here. So David Moran said, you mentioned Chuck Manto. How do you see leveraging his DTRA SBIR position to advance grid hardening?
He he has sources of money when he starts talking to me about it that also make my eyes roll in the back of my head. He's able to. He has contacts within the government, mostly at the federal level, with small business, SBIR, and I know it helped out quite a bit. I believe in the Joint Base San Antonio initiative that General Quast started. Is actually even started before the president put out the executive order, and Homeland Security definitely didn't think of it. Is that he would be a great one to at least advise you and assist you, because I believe he still has his 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 mind in that area, which I don't think money. I don't, but I know it takes money to save lives. That's all the
Right,
only part. Um,
right. So the next question is from Vic Solem, and he says, obviously, this is a fluid situation when it occurs, and prediction is difficult at best. What is a decent threshold for supplies to be survive to get to the other side of this city, suburb, and rural?
that's that's a question I think even Dr. Pry would have difficulty answering. Um, I think John Hollerman again encapsulate. Plan for the worst, hope for the best, and let God do the rest. It's not going to be. It's not going to be good. Um, some people say it takes a village and all that, whatever. But no, you take care of your family and you take care of others as any Christian would do, and time is not on your side. And I'll mention Dr. Peter Vincent Pry again because that was his favorite statement. Time is not on our side, and right now we're out of time. We have so many threat vectors hanging over our head, all Damocles swords. Uh, you can buy a device and go down for about $10,000. You can buy if you've seen what is it the heist Ocean's 11
Mm-hmm.
when they knocked the power with this van that opened up and so on, and they hit it. It's an EMP, actually IEM, intentional electromagnetic interference attack. That's down to a briefcase now. And who
Right,
knows? Maybe some of the 30,000 communist Chinese troops that passed through our southern border uh, uh, has the money right now to purchase some of those or be able to. These are the things that people I know are thinking of. Uh,
right,
there's you reach a point that you can't fathom what it's going to be like, especially for your family and so on. It's not going to be good unless we do something about it.
right, right.
And we have the equipment right now to put this stuff in, and some will still fail anyway. But we've got to spend the money to do this.
Right. Um, Johnny T says, thank you, General, for the great presentation. What do you think should be done more locally for local leaders to take security threats to critical infrastructure more seriously? Excellent question.
Well, protect the substations they have. You,
Hmm.
you can't put a big Faraday cage around a transformer. It emits too much heat. You can't do that, but you can control the station. There's 911 centers up in Waldo County. You can type this in on your Google. Waldo County 911 Center. They developed a backup system that was just phenomenal on just shoestring. I think left over some of that COVID fiasco money. They took some of that. Um, but it didn't cost an awful lot. They have backup fuel. They have food. They're probably the most precious person to make friends with is a ham radio operator. As long as you can supply them with MoGas for their generators and so on, but to get together and ask their local offices of emergency management the questions that I put in there that go to your local police chief and your fire chief and say, what are you doing to protect us from a long-term grid? A long-term grid in New York City's maybe 3 days if you're lucky. A long-term grid in uh, stump junk county out in the rural area, it might be 3-4 weeks before things really start turning bad and ugly, violent. In a suburban area, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. It's very subjective. But go to that office of emergency manager and the local utilities and saying, why don't forget the local electric grid was founded to make money, not to save lives, not to protect the citizens. It was made to make money. And there are some Dominion. There's some good companies out there that are really trying to help. But you have shareholders that and stakeholders and uh, that that run the meetings and so on.
Yep, and that's if the government were to give private industry $50 billion to fix and harden the grid, would what kind of accountability? I'm just throwing that out there as a question for people to think that they would actually use that money to really fix the
Well,
problems.
that's why you need a guru. You need
Hmm.
a head military HMF head military figure in charge. You need, and that's what we're trying to do. General Reiner, General Greiner, the former adjutant general in Colorado, Tommy Waller, so many smart people. Chuck Monto, yourself, you know this very well. You're on the same board I am, and and Glenn, and Glenn Rhodes, to have someone appointed at the federal level
Hmm.
at and be I hate the word czar,
But
but to have them as the czar to be able to just help at least accountability over those funds. But eventually, when you put them down to the boardroom of XL, whatever, PP&G, who knows what rabbit hole that money is going to go down.
right.
But paying money right now by the maybe just quite a few billion will save us money because it'll cost a loss of trillions and trillions of dollars, and 280 million lives after 1 year. Um,
Yeah, I think we have one more question. This has been great. We were a little over, but I wanted to get through these questions. So, will the adjunct generals of the state National Guard units participate in the exercise? This is going back to the previous question.
yes, we were having a liaison not only from the adjutant general in Albany during this exercise that we're going to put up in Western New York, and there's been other exercises that our folks have conducted. Yes, and the state, not only the state OEM will be there, but also the Northcom liaison officer. They have colonels in every state of the union in the 4 territories, and because I've been to every state of the union and all the territories already when I was in the military, and they're liaison officers to work with FEMA and with the state OEMs to be the liaison to Northern Command and say, what do you need from Northcom? But to him, the adjutant generals who have been negligent in trying to train and inform their National Guard soldiers of trying to work within this VUCA environment, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment, to take care of their families first. Because if you don't take care of the families first, knowing that they're okay, my joke is that you might be a soldier down at Fort Bliss, Texas, and you're from Buffalo, New York, and when the SHTF and you're asked to go out and help other people in your community, all of a sudden you're low on food, you're low on water because the defense industrial base stops
Hmm.
at a very short amount of time. Are you gonna? No, you're going to leave. You're you're going to leave,
Exactly.
and you need. That's why the military bases, I think, in the very near future will start having some small modular reactors with the SBIR, with some of the small business initiatives that we can work up. There's small modular nuclear reactors at select military posts that could be bastions of support, like Dr. Peter Vincent Pry used to call them, bastions that can help in the local community as much as possible with fuel reserve, uh, uh, grain reserve, fuel, and food, especially out in the more rural areas that may be able to save a portion of our fellow citizens. Not all. It'll be impossible.
Yeah, that's true. And the the thing that most folks don't consider are those that are in need of certain types of medication, like let's say insulin or other things, that will run out very quickly. And so there's a lot of our population that is at risk, even just to start, even in a short term, let's say 2 week outage, uh,
Well,
could
even
go
with
bad.
synthetic insulin and so on, it has to be a certain temperature. And
Yep.
how is the doctor going to order the computers or PLCs, program logic? They're not going to work. What's the 100,000 volts going through your computer going to do? You can't even observe a,
Yeah.
how many volts to ruin your computer. I'm speaking kind of excitedly about this because I had an oncologist talk to us. Uh, he happened to be in an audience, and he said, and he was great because he asked how many people here know or take insulin or friends, and kind of an awkward question, but quite a few raised their hand. And he said, "You'll have maybe 30 days at best."
Hmm.
It's just pacemakers are even worse, but I won't go there. Uh,
Hmm.
it's just the way it is, especially
Yeah.
with the enemies that we're fighting. Uh,
Yes.
does yeah, I've never been in war plans, never wanted to be except when I was in Iraq, and you have to look at the enemies. They don't have the same Westphalian thoughts that we do. They don't work within Geneva Convention and rules, especially the radical Islamists that we are encountering and seeing around us now. They think differently. So their their ruthlessness of these enemy nations that you have to plan for the worst case situation, uh, where all 10 FEMA regions might be involved, or even 7 or 8. And you won't have the cherry pickers going down to work on electrical lines down in Katrina from Ohio or whatever. You're not going to have that because their logistical headaches just to take care of the workers going down there too. Um, yeah, and churches going down to help build homes in North Carolina. That's not going to happen. Uh,
Yeah.
they'll be trying to survive on their own. And yeah, it sounds this is not all the sunshine I'm pumping up into the computer, into the podcast right now. I don't really mean to, but there's other areas that I can direct you towards if people are listening right now to send an email. I won't be able to answer all the questions, but I know the belly buttons to push that can answer the questions and contribute. But I would like people to go back and look at those books that John Hollerman wrote, because that's exactly the way it's going to happen. And even his sister wrote a book too about a nurse trying to make it down from, I believe it was Chicago. She was practicing trying to make it home, and the troubles that she encountered.
Yeah.
His sister wrote another award-winning book from Amazon,
Yeah. And we had
and
John
there's
Hollerman on last week, so we're going to have him on again, and I'd like to have the two of you on at the same time because I think it would make for a very insightful and
oh yeah,
enlightening
I
show.
would just I'll be on, but I'll just sit and listen to John because he was a survival, escape, resistance, and invasion SEER instructor
Yeah.
in the Air Force. He
Yeah.
knows the
Yep.
psychology of starvation and disease and
Yep.
no rule of law. You know.
So I know this sounds all negative, but it's ignorance is not. You really need the general public needs to know that this is a possibility, and I
Yeah,
say is a possibility, and it's not if, it's when, because in the last 2 years we've had at least 8 countries completely lose power across the country. So this is something that can happen here as well. They have the
yeah,
same
but
infrastructure.
like the Iberian Peninsula and so on. But there's one other thing, if I that I'm a little different. Even when I taught cyber warfare at the War College, and we didn't call it drone warfare because there's no such thing as a drone. They're unmanned aerial systems, remotely
Mhm.
piloted vehicles. They're not drones, but they're drones. I'm not going to fight the public on that. But cyber is actually physical. Cyber is kinetic.
Mhm.
Cyber can turn your lights off and on. Cyber can shut off a 400-ton diesel generator in Idaho National Lab with 32 lines of code on a laptop computer just a few miles
Yep.
away. I've seen a certain entity break into a nuclear power plant and the cooling rod system, the pulley. No, they can do that with a laptop computer, not some pimply faced kid in grandma's basement, but there's some sophisticated actors out there that can do
Mm-hmm.
that and probably do it from that building in Beijing.
Yep.
Because I know where the building is. They can do that from that building because there's no defense to there's no defense to cyber, none
Yep.
whatsoever,
Yep.
as you know. You
Yes.
can make precautions, but it's always the lowest. Somebody's using Windows 1,
Yeah.
whatever. I'm being
Windows
facetious,
Server
but
7.
human, awesome,
Yep.
HMI, whatever. They'll get into your system, and
Mm-hmm.
is even when I was at the Pentagon on my second recall, we were averaging 32,000 attacks a day at the Pentagon in the Army Operations Center. 32,000 a day,
Wow.
from the pimply faced kid all the way up to more sophisticated enemies. Um, yeah, and
Yeah.
it's people already know with target your bank accounts, and some people listening to the call right now, they have the IRS and OPM, 26 million records, Office of Personnel Management. I got uh, even the FBI, State Department. They've all been hacked into, and
Yes.
it's interesting.
Well,
Thank you, but I would love to have a
yes.
follow on with everyone, and because as I think people that are listening to me, they realize that I get pretty excited about this, and not excited, frustrated because not a damn thing has been done. Nothing,
Yeah.
and we're even increasing electricity all the more with these data centers, which we have to do, but it's a nightmare.
Right.
Uh,
Right. And I want
the
to
public
thank
doesn't know about
I want to thank you, General, for sharing your time, your experience, and your insights. And I will have you back very soon for a follow up on this and to cover other topics and actually do as well as having you alone, but also maybe with Tommy Waller and John Hollerman and
it.
to continue to educate the public on the essential threats on the grid, which are very real. As someone mentioned in the comment that it people still think these are all fantasy. It's not. It really is.
Yeah,
It can happen, and it's not. I think it's as I said earlier. It's not if, it's when, and we need to be prepared. So
yeah.
with that, General, thank you again. And for tomorrow, we're going to have a special podcast at 4 p.m. Eastern. Our guest will be David Pine. He's a Deputy Executive Director of the Task Force on National and Homeland Security. So David previously served as the president of the task force and as a defense and foreign policy advisor to the 2024 presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. And we will be discussing the topic, which is very timely: geopolitics and the grid. Should we be worried? So we look forward to having many of these podcasts with these wonderful industry experts and leaders. So with that, thank you again, General. And until next time, we will be back. Thank you.
Thank you.